No mai, haere mai, kia koutou katoa, Caroline Orchiston, core Caroline Orchiston. Thanks for coming. It's good to see some faces that are unfamiliar to us, and it's great that you've managed to come along today to listen to Leigh's presentation all about waste minimisation, which is obviously so important to all of us as individuals with across campus, and some of the initiatives that are coming on stream. Hopefully we'll hear about those today as well. So Leigh McKenzie is one of our alumni from the Centre for Sustainability. She did a summer project with us, how many years ago, Leigh? 4 or 5 years ago, and so we've watched her progress in council with great interest, and it's a real delight to have her back to share some of the work she's been doing. So welcome, Leigh. Looking forward to hearing what you
Kia ora koutou. Good morning. My name is Leigh. Thank you for the lovely introduction, Caroline. It's really nice to be back here and see all the friendly faces and be in familiar space again. I really enjoyed my time here. Nice. And Greg. All right. Well, yeah, I've been invited to give a presentation on waste minimisation. So my role is Waste Minimisation Officer at the Dunedin City Council. Yeah, so don't hold it against me. So yeah, my presentation is to give a bit of an idea of what's happening in Dunedin on the council front, and then also what that's achieving, but also what needs to happen to really get some good change. The bigger crux sort of things that have to change for us to be able to get some decent waste minimisation happening. Okay, so what are we doing in Dunedin? To give you a bit of background context, we offer like a range of services and projects from the Dunedin City Council, and they're funded in different ways. So some of them are funded through rates, and then others are through the waste levy, which is a tax on landfill. So the waste levy is particularly important to us and our team to achieve waste minimisation because it's a polluters pay system. So if you're putting rubbish in your red wheelie bin or in the black DCC rubbish bag, or if you've got a skip that's going to landfill, any of those methods, waste going to landfill, there's a tax on that, and it's called the waste levy. And it's $10 per tonne at the moment, but that's going to be increasing over the next 5 years to $60 per tonne. And that's actually becoming more in line with best practice. A lot of people think like, oh, you know, waste to landfill should be free. Then we wouldn't have illegal dumping. But actually, it's a bit, it doesn't really work that way. Yeah, I guess the tricky thing is that there's like people who will always do the right thing, and then there's a small group of people who just, you know, will illegally dump whether it costs or not. And studies have found that they're not really that linked. So we have this tax on waste to landfill, and it helps pay for the solution. So polluters pay, waste goes to landfill, and that helps fund the solution to the problem. So that's a really nice thing about having the waste levy. At the moment, we have the smallest waste levy out of all OECD countries, so it's seen as like bad practice, and it's difficult to get like enough infrastructure and enough services with the amount of funding, but it's about to increase, which is quite exciting. Yeah, so to sort of pick off some of the things that we offer, the curbside collection system. Everyone will be familiar with that. It's the yellow recycling bin with the blue crate for the glass. And then another one that's quite interesting is the landfill gas capture system. And that's funded through rates as well, and that's just part of operating the landfill. So when waste goes into a landfill, it emits greenhouse gas emissions. And we have a landfill engineer who very cleverly has created a retrofitted landfill capture system, and it's a series of pipes through the landfill that suck in gas, and then it gets taken away to help power the wastewater treatment plant. So it's creating energy, and then when we have too much energy for the wastewater treatment plant, it gets exported to the grid. There is some that we can't turn into energy, and it ends up being burnt off into carbon dioxide, so methane to carbon dioxide, which is, not the winning situation, but it's better than having methane. Yeah, so that is all part of the emissions trading scheme as well. So there's some taxes around that and so forth. Some that we use the waste levy to fund are some services like subsidised e-waste recycling. A new one that we have is polystyrene recycling. That goes to Cromwell and it's turned into underfloor insulation. So it's not exported overseas, which is really a good one as well. We've got some wonderful Enviro Schools facilitators who go around schools, primary schools and high schools and educate kids about how do we save the planet and why do we need to. Waste minimisation grants. We use the waste levy to fund activities that community groups or schools or businesses want to get involved in. So if you know anyone that wants to get involved with waste minimisation, I'm very eager to have a chat. And then those are things that we run internally, but we can't do everything internally. So we also partner with external groups to do things like bike refurbishment. The Malcolm Trust does an amazing job of they pretty much pull out bikes from landfill and refurbish them and get them back to people who need them, which is really neat. And a food rescue scheme as well through Kiwi Harvest. We fund those in the CBD, and they have it across the city and then also in other cities, but we are particularly funding the CBD area. We also do education and events. So we're running a sustainable living course in this room, I think, later this week on Saturday. And the landfill tours are really interesting. Seriously scary, but yeah, if you want to sign up for a landfill tour, yeah, really worthwhile. And then we've got some bigger changes on the cards, like an organics curbside collection is sort of up for consultation at the moment. So if you would like to have a food waste collection and an optional green waste bin, as well as your yellow and your blue, then write in and let us know, and we'll try and make that happen. But you have to say yes or no to inform us, because otherwise we don't know what to do. And also a construction demolition sorting facility. So yeah, a huge amount of waste that goes to landfill in New Zealand. I think on average 50% of waste to landfill in New Zealand is from the construction and demolition industry. So trying to have a facility to sort that would be absolutely excellent. We have one in Auckland in New Zealand, but other than that, we don't really have a lot of options for trying to sort out timber and getting it reused. I'm currently working on plasterboard recycling, and timber is on my list for later in the year. So that's a bit of Dunedin's situation at the moment. But how much is that achieving? Like, we have this range of services that I thought, you might want to know how, what dent are we making? So we report every year to the Ministry for Environment on how we use the funding they give us, the waste levy, and how much we're achieving with it, how much is being avoided and international. So our biggest one is the curbside collection system, which is 8,000 tonnes per year on average. That's of recycled material that excludes all the contamination that gets taken out. So that's all the stuff that gets sold. Education and engagement, we reach about 1,100 people each year. And polystyrene recycling that we just started about 3 weeks ago is getting really good uptake. And so I've extrapolated it for the rest of the year and expecting to get about 840 metres cubed out of landfill, which is really nice. But it's only possible because all these amazing people are choosing to do the right thing. And so people are choosing to recycle their tyres or their baby seats or their polystyrene or their e-waste. If we didn't have people choosing to do it, then none of these services would be, achieving anything. So it's really heartening to know that people are sort of taking up the services. So that is excellent, but unfortunately we still have 60,000 tonnes of landfill going to Green Island each year. So we've got a way to go. There's a lot of materials that we have to work out how to deal with. If we can find another use for them or recycle them or avoid them in the first place, hopefully. So what else? What else can we do? What else needs to happen? At the moment, society is kind of built on this linear model. So companies will create products and then people use them, and it's, maybe there's not a lot of great options, or, it's the norm, and there's, getting through life, and then at the end of those products' lives, then it's like, what do we do? They're being created with total disregard to what happens at the end. These companies have no reason to really worry about what's happening here. And so then it's up to the consumers and government to be like, oh, what can we do? Like, can we recycle this somehow? Can we, does it have to go to landfill? We have to offer all these services to deal with what these companies are producing. But increasingly, people are wanting the change, which is really exciting. So Plastic Free July is a really well-known campaign started in Australia, and across New Zealand we had like a 40% increase in uptake of Plastic Free July. That was in 2019. Yeah. So people are really starting to get involved. The Colmar-Brunton report last year, I think, said that the build-up of plastic in the environment is the second highest concern of New Zealanders last year. So that's just enormous. You think about all the problems, and plastic being second just shows, like, the enormity of the issue, and that people do care about this. They want to do something about it. They want change. So everyone's like keen to make the change, and I guess because of that linear model and trying to rely on recycling so far, we've still got legacy issues. So things like hazardous waste, like asbestos, always have to go to landfill. We can't recycle asbestos. But a good example, a really nice win, would be the chlorofluorocarbons, the CFCs, that were widely used in refrigeration. How long ago? Maybe like a few decades ago. And they were making a hole in the ozone layer. And internationally, people pulled together and said, we can't have this. This is really dangerous to the planet. So we have to put in regulations and pull together and make this change. And there was a really good alternative, and they started using those, and the solution has worked. So it's a good example of like a hazardous waste that has been designed out of products. So now the companies are being responsible for the environmental harm of their products. So hopefully that kind of thing happens with plastic. And then, other materials that exist, I kind of question, like, there was asbestos and now there's plastic, but what might be next, as we continue creating products. Well, you might be interested to see the composition of Green Island landfill. So this segment here is organic waste. So we kind of split organics into like kitchen food waste, and then compostable things, and then non-compostable things. Then we've got timber and rubble, also quite big portions of the pie. So it would be really good to be able to address organics and construction and demolition waste. kind of the two big things that we can try and address next. And those are both in the 10-year plan. And in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, some items that go to landfill are emitting and some are considered inert and don't emit. So concrete doesn't really emit, glass doesn't really emit in landfill, but things like food waste or actually timber is the heaviest emitter. So there's emission factors that you multiply the weight of the material by to work out how heavily emitting that material is in your landfill. And timber is responsible for 40% of the emissions in our landfill. So yeah, timber is a really difficult one to get reused or find another use for. Like treated timber is, full of arsenic and cadmium. It's often got glue or paint or nails on it. So yeah, trying to work out timber is quite difficult. I think the whole country struggles with that. Yeah, so how do we deal with all of these materials that are going down this way and like what we can't like start at the disposal end and try and fix the problem because it's an upstream battle. It's like a band-aid on a broken arm. So we have to actually start from the design end of things. To get really good waste minimization, you have to avoid it. And so there are some really exciting projects underway in this area. So a gentleman called Jed Finch, he's currently doing his PhD, he's finished his master's, and he's coming up with a zero waste building solution. So he's found a way to cut plywood into crosses that slot together and create walls that are weight load bearing. Yeah, so they can be disassembled and reassembled, and they don't have to be demolished. So the concept behind it is kind of like if you have a house and you've got like maybe 4 bedrooms, and maybe the oldest kid grows up and moves out, then he can like disassemble the walls and take the walls with him and build it onto his house. Yeah, that would be quite neat. He's got a TED talk that I recommend. Wishbone Design Studio is starting to, well, they've been doing this for a while now actually, sorry, but they create kids' toys like bikes, and they're also made out of pieces that can be reassembled. So say you buy a bike and it's kind of made out of like timber and carpet offcuts, and they can be reassembled into a bike that suits a 5-year-old and then later into a 7-year-old's bike. And so instead of having 3 different bikes, then they've been able to use the same one for a long time. And you can buy different parts. And the company actually also helps support people sell them second-hand, which is like, I've never seen any company do that before. They'll like promote your Trade Me ad, it's super neat. They're yeah, spot on. We had a talk by a gentleman from the Green Building Alliance last year. He gave a talk to the construction sector, and something that struck me was light as a service. So, why do we all buy our own light fittings and our own light bulbs? If we could lease light as a service and have maybe like a monthly subscription, and a business could come in and supply the light fittings and the light bulbs and be responsible for the repairs and maintenance, then they're incentivized to choose products that are long lasting and require like least maintenance and are made of like good quality materials. And then it also reduces consumption because not every individual is buying their own light bulbs and having to make that difficult choice of, do I make the right choice for the planet, or do I do something that suits my pocket at the moment? I think that would be a really good one. It would generate employment, but also reduce consumption. So yeah, there's a lot of things about reducing waste that can be a win on so many fronts for the economy, but also the planet. And that's what the circular economy is about. So it's the ultimate goal, is to try and make sure that every product has a plan for the end. So bicycle seats or something, instead of that ending up in landfill, maybe it can be worked into something else, another piece of furniture, or choosing to design things in a way that means the materials are recyclable instead of being like composite, not repairable, like everything is planned to be circular. So the linear system that we have at the moment has been trying to use the recycling system as a solution. But we can't do that because it's currently too much material to recycle onshore, and it's been heavily reliant on offshore markets as well, which is unethical and needs to change. We've recently changed the recycling criteria so that it's more recyclable onshore, but there's just so much of it in New Zealand that we can't process it all here. So we need to be avoiding the waste from the outset. Can we reuse the containers that we have? And central government is doing some work on this. There's a container return scheme that's being worked on, and product stewardship. And both of those are about trying to put the responsibility on the producer. So if you have a container return scheme, is when you have a bottle and you can take it back to the supermarket and you get 20 cents back. That's funding because of the company that's created the bottle. So they're responsible for all the packaging that they're creating. Same with product stewardship for other things like tyres and batteries. The companies producing them become responsible for providing the recycling service at the end, with the how to deal with that product, rather than it being up to consumers and the government dealing with the commercial groups. So those are two changes those are big changes that are kind of like slow burns. They're underway, but they're a while away. So in the meantime, we can use things like engineering and infrastructure to try and change behaviour and make it easier for people to do the right thing and recycle a bit more and avoid waste from going to landfill. And one example is transfer stations. So if you've been to the tip at Green Island, maybe like going out with a trailer from a weekend cleanup or something along these lines, we've got like a place where you can drop off recyclables and the rest of the waste. But if you redesign them, you can make sure that people are dropping off so you drive in and go through all the diversion areas, and so you drop off all of the things that can be avoided from landfill, and then the last thing is the waste. Then you end up diverting a lot more, and you can also align costs that way. So putting weigh bridges in after the diversion area means that people are only paying by weight for what they're putting to landfill instead of the load. At the moment, I think we charge per vehicle or per trailer or per bag, but we're almost there with changing it to being by weight and having a new layout that means people go through the diversion area and then lastly to the landfill area. So that's some change. So thank you very much for your time. Here are some additional resources. This is the Zero Waste Building Solution TED talk that I'd recommend from Jed Finch. There's some more information about the circular economy that Ellen MacArthur researches, and by the Ministry for Environment and the return scheme and the product stewardship system that is kind of in progress by the Ministry for Environment. And I do encourage you to look at the 10-year plan and see whether you would like to have a new curbside collection system or a construction demolition facility. So did anyone have any questions? Oh, I've got 2 questions. Thank you first.
Thanks. Look at the slide with the pie diagram, if you don't mind. But bottom right, there's a chunk that's not labelled. I take it that's sort of kitchen organics, is it?
Paper?
No,
right next to it.
So the one that's not labelled. I take it that's kitchen organics.
Yes, you are right. That's food waste.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that's still quite a big chunk, isn't it?
Certainly is.
Chunk.
Sorry, I don't know why I don't have the label on there. But yes, quite right, it is, because we've got timber, paper, compostable garden waste, non-compostables. And the missing one is food waste. Excuse me.
From that, going on from that, with the possible new food waste and green waste bins, what is their final destination?
So yeah, in introducing that system, we'd be building a curbside, a organics composting facility. So it'd get composted and then get sold to like horticultural or agricultural uses. And people would be able to buy it for home use as well.
Would there be an extension to like pick up from departments in the university as well?
Hopefully, yeah. I don't actually have the answer to that. We're focused on like residential. We'd consider the university sort of like a commercial group. They might be able to contract a service like that.
To composting? Or?
Might be, yeah. I imagine it's something that the university would have to choose to get a contract for with another, say like enviro waste or waste management to offer that service. But we wouldn't offer it through like a rates paid system because, I mean, we would offer it to like flats, but in terms of like the buildings on campus, it would be a commercial thing.
Can you tell us a bit more about the work you have done in partnership with the university? Because I understand there have been some projects that you've done together.
Oh yes, absolutely. So I guess the university has been having skip days, and you can correct me if you want to jump in at all then, because Andrina and Greg are involved with this as well, waste management at the university. But we've been trying to make that instead of a skip day into a diversion day, and that's with help from students and increasing services to recycling things around. Yeah, it's been quite good. Building some like recycling hubs, because there's so many students in a small area. So instead of average occupancy of a house being like maybe 3 people, I'm sorry, I don't know off the top of my head, but maybe most of New Zealand, Dunedin is like 2-3 people per household. The student area is 6 to 8. So they still only have one yellow lidded wheelie bin, and so it gets really full. And then there's like a backlog of material. So we're building recycling hubs so that people can drop material off as well. So additional capacity.
Are there any plastic recycling options in Dunedin for everyday plastic that's not accepted for the curbside collection?
Yes, on like a small scale. So there are, I think, so you're meaning like 3, 4, because we accept 1, 2 and 5s, and there's 1 to 7 plastics. So you're asking about 3, 4 and 6.
Well, I've got a whole lot of waste that I need to take somewhere around my house. So, and one of it is like a broken steamer container. It's just shattered into pieces, and I don't know what to do with it. So it's like,
Tricky thing.
yeah.
There are a lot of, a lot of difficult items. Do you know what number it is?
I don't think it's within.
1 to
I think it's beyond the 1 to 3.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry, I don't think I can help you there. I think it has to go to landfill. There's like packet recycling, but they only take number 5, for example. They're in Kaikorai Valley. Yeah, I'm sorry, I think that is one of those.
Wait, sorry, can I just ask another quick question?
Yes.
Where can we find more information on these points around Dunedin, the different types of recycling, like small scale recycling? I'm not sure where to look.
Yeah, it's probably not easily found actually. I'd say like try searching online, and I guess you've probably done that. The recyclability of like difficult plastics isn't really available. I'm sorry, it's definitely just number 5 in Kaikorai Valley.
Is some of that available on the app, the curbside recycling app?
Yes, yeah, you can
Some of the information.
curbside collection app, you can search like items and say it's like an A to Z thing.
So that's on the DCC website.
Yes,
Yeah.
and something you can have on your phone. What do I do with a light bulb? And you can search that and it will tell you like the best place to dispose of that in Dunedin.
So just a comment, and I'll declare my stripes. I work for waste management, but just to answer your question is what he's talking about in terms of facilities for handling green waste, food waste and other things, that's the actual problem. It's not a question of collecting it. So you'll find that I believe that if the DCC are going to go ahead with a green waste / compost facility, they will want to have additional tons of green waste, food waste from commercial sources. And by having that facility, which is effectively on the back of the residential contract, you will find that companies like ourselves will come and pick it up because there's somewhere for it to go. Often the challenge is we all have the same objective in mind, but at the end of the day, with respect like your Systema container, if you've got one of those, you need a significant quantity of specific products and somewhere for it to go. So to your point, there definitely will be more options for places like the university and others. When there's something.
It also seems strange to me that they separate out the garden waste from the food waste, and then you also can't add in things like your food contaminated cardboard containers from takeout, and your bamboo cutlery, and your hand towels from the
We would agree with you.
You know, like all of that stuff to me is compostable, so should we go into one big bin?
Well, I guess it's about trying to keep the material as high quality as you can so that you can find an end use for it. If you end up accepting, there's a lot of brands that say compostables packaging, and it's like a plastic that isn't really compostable unless it's in particular conditions. But then even still, there's brands that aren't recyclable in particular conditions and they're not regulated. And so you end up with a whole lot of compost that has to be sieved to get the plastic out. So by having those like acceptance criteria, it just means that we're able to do something with the end product. If we loosen that too much, then it gets, I mean, even just with the yellow bin, it's hard to get people getting the right things in. It's a very confusing thing, but I mean, we get things like animal carcasses and dog poo and nappies, and so having a composting bin is like, you got to make it so clear, and you have to be really like careful about what you choose to accept and not accept to make sure that the end product is going to be able to be used.
Still leaves you with a lot of problems though.
How much learning goes on between the different councils? For example, I was up in Tauranga recently and they don't have a curbside recycling scheme at all at the moment, which I couldn't believe, but it's coming in soon. But in Christchurch, I know they've been doing compostable recycling and, with a really great output into in terms of generating compost for quite a few years. So do you meet together and talk about solutions and finding better ways to do things?
I think that the waste sector is really good at that in New Zealand. We definitely have a good network. There's we have a lobby group called like Waste Bins, and basically everyone in the waste sector is part of Waste Bins, and it's definitely good involvement from local government. We're always talking to like Queenstown and Clutha and Waitaki to share ideas and see if we can work together on finding solutions because we're in the same region. And we definitely talk to other places that are ahead of us on things and see like how did they do it, what do we have to plan for. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's really good. Everyone's friendly as well.
Thank you, it's really interesting. You mentioned the Compost report and how plastic waste in the environment was the second greatest concern amongst the members. I was wondering if you knew what the greatest concern was and how close was it?
I think plastic was 61 and 62%, and I think the next thing was something like 73%, and it was a social issue, like it might have been cost of living, I think, which is fair enough. I think another one that was close, because the comparison was like for adults and for youth, and another one that was really high up was violence. Yeah.
You know where climate change was on the list?
Yeah, I can't remember. I'm sorry.
Are you able to talk a little about what actually happens with the plastic recycling? Because I know the criteria have changed recently. We talked about trying to get a better quality product, so there's a market for it at the end. There was always, you know, rumours swirling that the DCC believes this material and then they just, you know, it all goes into a giant heap somewhere. Are you able to talk about what happens?
Yep, I can to a degree. I don't know enough, say plastics, for example, 1 to 5, there's some of it gets recycled in New Zealand, which is really nice. With paper, a lot of that goes to, I think, like India and Malaysia at the moment. Some of it's in New Zealand, but I think at the moment most of that's still offshore. Tin and steel is mostly in New Zealand with steel and metal recyclers. Glass is a nice one because it gets taken up to Auckland and turned into new glass bottles within New Zealand.
Is that happening in the South Island? Because on one of the websites I read, it was just crushed for roading.
Oh, so every district council does it slightly differently because of access to freighting things. So we're on a relatively easy, I mean, I say relatively because like Queenstown, for example, it's a really hard time reaching Auckland. So does Clutha, but we've got like a port, which helps in rail. Yeah.
So, okay, so it is different per region, because the other website I read, it was just a blanket, South Island just crushes it.
I would disagree.
Okay, that's all right.
Hi there, just want to say thank you for talking as well. I just have a quick question. I think on your first slide you said that there was Bakashi composting subsidies. Yeah. I'm not too sure what that looks like right now, how much of a subsidy that is. But is it like anything, I mean, Greg, sorry, was it Greg? Yep. Yeah, mentioned that you're wanting to develop a food waste facility. Is there anything pushing general public in that to be putting more composting bins in for the domestic use?
It's a good question. Okay, well, we'll start from the Bakashi stuff. Yeah, we subsidise Bakashi bins to cost price. If you go to Bunnings or another retailer, it'll be like $60 to $80, and we sell it at more like $30 to $35. So it's cost price. In terms of pushing for more domestic composting bins in backyards, I don't actually have an answer. I don't think I don't have anything that I can think of. I think we've been, it's like we call it the green cone, where you can it's like a composting bin that you can kind of bury into your soil, that we're also starting to offer. So that's to try and encourage back garden composting. Yeah, but I haven't really received any questions of, like, you know, we get inquiries. I don't really get any for bins in our backyard, but definitely about curbside collections, because I guess it's convenient.
So I did see you actually run courses on composting.
That's true, you do, yeah. That's actually got, people really enjoy those, because I think composting is something a lot of people do and have problems with, because it gets all smelly and, like, you know, what is the right way to do compost? Do that.
There seem to be some limitations on recycling, so yellow bin, you take the larger things, not the small things like lids.
Yes.
Why is that?
So there's a two-pronged reason for the lids. One is they're usually a different material to the container that they're on. And so it's about trying to get like a pure end product. And the other thing is that the lids get caught in all the conveyor belts and often jam the system. Yes.
Oh, we can now put polystyrene in the yellow bin, can we?
Not in the yellow bin, but you can take it into a drop-off point at Mitre or in Green Island.
Why can't we put it in the yellow bin? Couldn't you actually do that extraction as well?
I guess it's about scale.
Yeah, it breaks up into tiny pieces and, you know, too easily. It probably contaminates everything else.
Yes, I know. When you can't put it in the yellow bin, I think basically tendency for laziness to kick in. I'll just toss it in the rubbish.
Yeah, but it's quite hard to get that stuff into your black bag, I've found, you know,
Big
regulation.
My contains things tiny. I took some, it's like, oh, okay. And it has to be perfectly clean because I had some underfloor stuff. I was like, oh, cool, I can recycle it there. But I just put a few bits and I'm like, it's already full. You know, it wasn't that successful.
I'm really interested in how the, I guess, the waste sector is increasingly moving into this idea of circular economy. And apart from the, I guess, the national initiatives that seem to be led by MFE at the moment, is there something that DCC is doing to encourage local businesses to engage with the circular economy concept?
Good question. Well, we have our grant applications that come through, and I guess it's a way of trying to enable businesses to go that way. So we're often talking to like the Chamber of Commerce or different like businesses that already exist and say like, hey, like, we have these grants available. Is there something you'd like to change in your business to try and be more circular? And we do get really good uptake from our commercial grants at the moment. So some examples would be a real estate agent has started making signs instead of on those single-use core flute things. They've made like an electronic screen version that's like in an aluminium case with glass and lighting and stuff, and so they can put whatever image they want there, and so it's a reusable sign instead of you know, part of the new state signs. Yeah, it's definitely just about us trying to fund those initiatives.
If that's all the questions, thank you so much, Leigh. That was really informative, and so please join with me to give Leigh a